Okay, so good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Thank you very much for joining this session. It is the Implementing Climate Targets in Apec across NZBA priority sectors. So my name is Yuki Yasui, and I'm the Managing Director of the Glasgow Financial Alliance for Net Zero, GFANZ's Asia Pacific Network. I'm based in Singapore, and we have three fantastic speakers on this session who are all from the Asia Pacific and part of the Net Zero Banking Alliance. So just a quick introduction about GFANZ for those who may not know about us. So the Glasgow Financial Alliance for Net Zero is a consortium or an umbrella that brings together all the net zero sector-specific alliances like the NZBA, the Net Zero Banking Alliance, into one strategic financial sector alliance for net zero. So we have about 500 financial institutions that are committed to bringing their finance emissions to net zero by 2050. And they are worth $130 trillion together in terms of their financial assets, which represents 40% of the global industry. So you can see that the finance sector is really harnessing this challenge. And today we hope to hear from the three speakers about how they have set their ambitious targets and trying to implement that. So without further ado, let me introduce the three speakers and ask them to introduce themselves. So I have Mr. Cho Jong-hoon, Head of ESD Division, Shinhan Financial Group. Mr. Cho, if you can just give a quick self-introduction, please.
Hello, everyone. I'm Jong-hoon Cho, Head of Shinhan Financial Group's ESG division, and actually I joined the Shinhan Financial Group about 28 years ago, and worked for Hong Kong IB Investment Banking Division and also US subsidiary, and I'm very glad to be here. Global Roundtable together with the advanced front runner such as DBS and Westpac at this time. And I'm very good to see you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cho. Then moving on to Siobhan Tuhill, Chief Sustainability Officer of Westpac in Australia.
Thanks, Yuki. So I'm the Head up Sustainability across the Westpac Group. We are a large bank in Australia. My remit covers climate change, human rights, now, of course, increasingly natural capital, as well as Indigenous affairs and other areas of social impact as well. I've been with the group for 9 years and I've seen extraordinary change over that time. Thanks, Yuki.
Thank you. And our last but not least speaker is Kobe Wong, Senior Vice President of Sustainability at the Institutional Banking Group in DBS Bank in Singapore.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Kobe. I am effectively the project manager of the Net Zero project that DBS recently embarked on and recently make a disclosure to on our target setting work. So our group basically, or our team basically sits within the so-called corporate banking group, institutional banking group, where we actually help our corporate clients on all ranges, a wide range of sustainability issues, including ESG risk, as well as simple finance. Net zero happens to be within our group remit, and we're spending quite a bit of time on it in the last year or two.
Okay, thank you very much for all three of you. Really excited to talk about your ambitious targets that you have been issuing recently and about how you are trying to implement them. So let me just already dive into the first discussion topic, which is around towards translating commitment into action. So most of you have signed up in 2021 and have set your ambitions, your targets this year. And we'd like to maybe start asking them one by one. So let me start with Shinhan first. So Shinhan declared its net zero ambition in 2020 and joined not just NZBA, but also the NZAMI and NZIA, which are the asset management and the insurance alliances in 2021. In your TCFD report, you have set net zero targets and measured your financed emissions baseline using the PCAF, the Partnership for Accounting Financials, disclosing your financed emissions by asset class and by industry. And from this disclosure, the readers can know that your power generation is Shinhan's most carbon intensive sectors, and that it does take that's the sector that takes up the largest share in your financed portfolio. The other high emitting sectors are steel and cement. So there's a popular phrase where it says what can't be measured can't be managed, and so Junhon, in the process of measuring and understanding your finance emission, what were the key insights that you gained from that process? Any changes that you have introduced as a result of understanding your emissions?
Great. Thank you for your wonderful opening and introduction, Yuki. As you mentioned, Shinhan announced the net zero carbon driver strategy in 2020 and signed to join the NGBA, NGAMI, and NGIA also in 2021. And I think it was coming from reflecting the fact that establishing 4 stages of strategic direction. The 4 strategies means measurement, analysis, science-based target setting, and execution. As you cited the praise at the COP26 Marrakesh partnership last year, Shinhan's chairman also emphasized the matter of measuring emissions, quoting what can't be measured can't be managed. So Shinhan completed the finance emission measurement system early this year, mainly for Shinhan's periodic ongoing monitoring. This system is now integrated into our group's risk management system, and a total of 6 asset classes based on PCAP are measured on a quarterly basis now. And through the financed emission measurement system, we are able to monitor changes in financed emission by asset, industry, and client types. And on one hand, from a risk perspective, it is used as a tool of limit the total exposure of carbon-intensive companies such as utilities and power generation, which is highest emitting sectors, or to check whether green financing is available at the time of loan executions or loan extension. On the other hand, as for the opportunity side, each business division set a target to reduce finance emission as a task and engage to expand transition finance based on this issue. Business division can clearly recognize which clients need to further promote ESG and drive relevant financial support. On top of that, Shinhan aims to perform time series analysis on finance emission based on the risk management system I mentioned, and also identify client willingness to green. and used as a basis for asset portfolio adjustment. As you well recognize, as the asset size increase, so does the absolute amount of finance emission. However, through this process, it is possible to determine how green the new assets are compared to the level of gross finance emission. So to reach our goals, Shinan needed to have a clear idea of where we are now. In this respect, I think that identifying emission is the priority on the road to net zero. Thank you.
Thank you. Wow, that's really great to hear that you are using so much data on emissions intensity and absolute, and that really, plays a big role in your allocation of capital. That is really great to hear. Okay, now moving on, Westpac, Simone. So congratulations to Westpac for joining NZBA in July. I think you are one of the newer members of this community, but at the same time, you caught up really quickly by announcing your targets, your 2030 targets at the same time. So that's also another congratulations for you. In line with Westpac's long-standing commitment to sustainable development, Westpac's net zero transition plan is underscored by a commitment to a just transition. Now, can you tell us a little bit more about what just transition means to Westpac and what kind of actions you are doing towards that?
Yeah, thanks, Yuki. And yeah, I'll start with a little bit about our approach to begin with. So last year, we were really excited when we saw the Net Zero Banking Alliance announced. And then, of course, we saw all the further commitments at COP as well. But we were really mindful that it's a substantive commitment. And and for us also, it's a really powerful way to build on our involvement in UNEP 5's principles for responsible banking. So, and as part of PRB, you're expected to set up targets in 2 key areas, and climate obviously being a key area for us, and in fact for most banks that have signed up to the PRBs. But we decided to take time to work through our due diligence and really assess what that commitment to net zero banking would look like for us. And we wanted to make sure that we brought our bankers with us and that we also spent time really helping our executives and our board to really understand what this commitment would involve. Now, we're not going to have all the answers, but we wanted to have a pretty clear understanding of what we were signing ourselves up to. So as part of that, it actually made sense to start work on our first targets. And by doing that, we really did understand what we were committing to as we worked through that first tranche of fossil fuel related targets. And as part of that, we really focused to lean in and support our customers through what is a really remarkable period of change, of transition. And so our preference is to work with customers as they go through changes, as they invest in technology, as they change the nature of their portfolios, and as they transition the nature of their businesses. And as part of this climate response, as you mentioned, Yuki, a just transition is part of this ambition. So while a transition will lead to a reduction in emissions, we know that it will also lead to some social potential for social change as well, and perhaps as part of that, disruptions. And so we need to be really mindful around how we can build in or support resilience as part of that change. So while investments are required to decarbonise, we think it's really important that there's appropriate policies that incentivise and support transition, but also leading to economic growth and resilience through time as well. And I think what's also really important, and I had the great privilege last week of spending time with members of the PRB and also of the Net Zero Banking Alliance SteerCo, and spending time with other leaders working in this space. There's a real sense that how climate change and human rights or social impact intersect is really key. And this idea or term of intersectionality, we're hearing a lot more now as well. And of course, just transition is a really critical and important example of that. Now, it's fair to say when it comes to just transition, there are no easy answers. You know, there are trade-offs. We need to work through what are those implications, and we really need to lean in and support customers to work through that. We need to be engaging, we need to be listening to clients, but also to impacted communities to understand how this can be best managed. And really it's going to require collaboration also with government as well as civil society as we work through this. We think this is really important as we support that technological change, but we've also got to support social and economic initiatives where there is change. And thinking about it in terms of place, I think is going to be quite important as well. Looking at some of the thinking that's been done internationally, there's a real sense of you need to think about what the impact is in particular places or regions. So as I said, working with government and also with peers, working with peers through our respective local banking associations is going to be important. This isn't going to be one area where you as a bank are going to seek to win or necessarily be competitive. That doesn't make sense. It actually makes sense that we really seek to collaborate and find solutions together. And I think what I will also highlight is working through the GFANs and the UNEP networks, learning from each other around the world, around the different solutions we're finding or the ways that we're working with government as well as with clients and with other banks as well, other financiers is going to be really important. So as I said, no easy answers, a really important commitment and collaborating for impact is going to be critical. Thanks.
Great, thank you. So I guess for you, just transition means bringing everyone with you, your customers, your community, and working with other sections of the society like government, civil society, and your peers, and really thinking about the social impact as well as the outcome of your emissions as well.
That's right. Yeah, thanks, Yuki.
Great. So now let me turn to Kobe for DBS. So DBS is the first bank in Singapore to sign up to the Net Zero Banking Alliance. And last month, you became the first bank in Southeast Asia to set the Net Zero 2030 targets. So congratulations on that. And your 2030 emission reduction targets are really comprehensive, covering 7 sectors, which is very impressive for the first publication of your targets. What I would like to ask first, though, is about your targets on GHG data coverage. So DBS has set GHG data coverage targets for food and agri sector and chemical sector. So it's not an emission reduction target. What was the rationale for setting data coverage targets for these sectors, and how will you incentivize your clients to make sure that they measure and disclose their emissions?
Okay, I guess I would use this opportunity to echo the 2 previous speakers just now mentioning about the importance of data and working together and advance the agenda. I can share that, say, DBS actually set the data coverage target or came to the conclusion that we should set a data coverage target, primarily because we wanted to be proactive in advancing the agenda. So as we were progressing in the process of baselining and target setting work, we actually were seriously considering all 9 sectors. All 9 sectors actually went through the same process of baselining, target setting process to try to understand where and what we could do to set credible targets that are impactful and achievable and aligned with the net zero commitment. And towards the end, we came to a understanding, or we made the observation that we could not deny that data quality and availability is an issue for some sectors. And inherently, DBS majority of clients are based in Asia. GHG monitoring and public disclosure may not be as common or broad as other geographies. And we did encounter, particularly in the food and agribusiness and chemical sectors, that even when we try a very best effort to gather data from both third-party and bottom-up research, we felt that the quality was still less than desirable. Let's put it that way, for target setting in a confident manner. And the other aspect is that we also look at, for all the 9 sectors, we actually examine available methodologies and scenarios out there to make sure that, the approach we've taken, the scenarios we've taken are science-based and industry accepted it's quite important to be aligned with the industries and where they're going, and we want to be part of it and motivate, therefore, for them to stick to those scenarios. For food and agri and chemicals, they actually have these common characteristics. It's each of the two sectors, a very wide range of products. If we were to quantify carbon footprint of soybean versus cotton versus as far as down as avocado or cashew nuts, the greenhouse gas footprint actually per unit output varies significantly. And it's the same for chemical sectors, given the large number of products that the sector offer and the different geographies. And it was a challenge to find a mature enough pathway common across this specific sector to allow us to say, hey, there is this scenario, there is this approach, and it is actually applicable not just about the whole sector, but even a subsegment of the sector. You can imagine for food and agribusiness, we're talking about not just about the production process, it could be the land use change emissions. So it introduces quite a number of variables that at the moment we felt a little bit uncertain still. But we didn't necessarily want to put these two sectors aside and leave them as they were. We felt that if we had included them, we wanted to, one of the philosophies we had to begin with was this cross-sectoral synergies. So we think about it, by decarbonizing the power sector, we hopefully will then decarbonize sectors that are very dependent on the grid. So we do believe that having a broad sectoral approach will allow us to create synergies. And food and agri and chemicals could both be energy consumer as well as energy generator, particularly nowadays looking at biofuel, right? A lot of that biofuel would be coming from potentially food waste, organic waste, and maybe potentially agri products as well. So we didn't necessarily want to abandon them, having gone through all the hard work. And in order to find a way to proactively contribute for the time being, we thought that having a data coverage target would be meaningful, because not only we would be able to advance the agenda, but at the same time, we can encourage our customers to monitor, quantify, and disclose hopefully in line with best practices, because even with some methodologies out there, sometimes it can be challenging, particularly in the food and agri sector, to quantify in a systematic manner because of the various pieces and segments that are involved in the sector. So by setting data coverage target, we simply take that proactive approach to advance the agenda. At the same time, we want to work with clients to make sure that, hey, we want to, we are now the net zero bank, and we want to support and facilitate such. And so that's why we end up setting up the data coverage target. And that's and it's not some clients are very, very happy with that, and that they are looking forward to some of these conversations, and we may have to motivate some more clients to come on board. Mm-hmm.
So on that incentivizing your client question then, so you said that some were very willing and very, embracing your initiative, and those some were not so happy or confident about it. So
exactly.
what things that you are thinking of doing in terms of the engagement with these less innovative or less enthusiastic clients?
So actually, if we, at least from my experience working with our clients, we provide a lot of support to our clients in terms of environmental social practices. For some clients, they actually approach us and say, hey, how can we do that? And do you have any recommendation? And we actually set up separate sessions to have a walkthrough with them to show them how. And my honest opinion is that many of our clients want to, and sometimes particularly for companies that may be in the SME segment, may not necessarily have the knowledge or the bandwidth to do so. And it's not that they don't want to, it's just that they currently don't have that knowledge in-house or bandwidth. And therefore, our ESG support has come in quite handy we tend to have, let's say, one-on-one conversations with many of our corporate clients on their ESG strategy, as well as practices and where they can make it a bit more efficient, make it one of our philosophies here is, let's say, if we can support our clients understand a ESG strategy and how to incorporate into corporate strategy as part of the business. We do look at climate change as both a risk management as well as an opportunity. Like you mentioned, there are plenty of opportunities out there in the next few decades in terms of investment, business opportunities to go low carbon. We tend to look at that as maybe highlighting some of these areas to our clients, and therefore they become quite interested and motivated to do so because they do see that there's a business angle, not just doing good, but doing good while doing well.
Yeah, no, that's well put. I totally agree that emission measurement is traditionally seen as a cost to the company, but as ESG becomes much more embedded into the business strategy and the corporate business model, it does become an opportunity as well. So thank you. Okay, so let's go on to the next section then, which is discussions around the challenges and opportunities in the APEC region. And I'll turn to Siobhan first. So it's something that I noticed when I was reading your 2030 targets. I saw that your priority sectors for emission reduction is around manufacturing, utilities, and mining, based on your lending exposure. And this was the bit that it caught me, was that you were looking at both the on-balance sheet but also the off-balance sheet. And right now, the NZBA guideline just requires you to look on the on-balance sheet only. So what was your rationale for doing that extra mile? Thank you.
Thanks, Yuki. Well, I think partly to start with, we've always reported on TCE, particularly around our fossil fuel sectors. And I think it's really important when it comes to disclosures that you're, as much as possible, you seek to be consistent in terms of how you communicate with your investors. And certainly what we hear from our investor relations team is that, investors don't want to see surprises, and as much as possible, we can provide that year-on-year information. That's really important. And we know, particularly when it comes to emissions intensive sectors, that time series of information or data is really important. So we assessed and set our net zero lending targets using total committed exposure, or TCE. And for us, that represents the maximum amount of credit exposure that Westpac's committed to provide a customer, both on and off balance sheet, including those that arise from transactional banking. So that means that we do differ from current PCAF guidance. And I'm sure PCAF, when I refer to PCAF, I think most people know what I'm referring to in terms of that guidance, a way to calculate financed emissions. And so for PCAF, the measurement and disclosure of finance emissions only covers financial products that are on the balance sheet. And if you were to use PCAF's method, that would mean that finance emissions from products are only considered if there's outstanding finance on the institution's balance sheet at the financial year end. So I guess by using TCE also for our targets, we feel that we're taking a more comprehensive approach and reflecting our decisions to extend credit to customers. And it allows also for better long-term management of our targets. It helps to avoid some of that potential volatility that you can get due to customers' use of their facilities over time as well. So we've calculated our finance emissions by attributing customers' emissions using our TCE to the customers. So I think in a way, this kind of highlights that there's no one or perfect way to navigate net zero target setting or finance emissions calculations. We've certainly looked at PCAF, we referenced PCAF, but we also have some differences for the reasons that I've set out as well. And I think importantly for organisations, you need to decide your strategy. You need to be clear about what you're seeking to achieve. And you also need to take into account the guidance from your local regulators and what your peers are doing as well, particularly in your jurisdiction. And certainly in my jurisdiction, being conservative and being really comprehensive is really key. So yes, we've referenced guidance for NZBA. We've certainly looked at PCAF and we reference it, but we've also decided that we want to be really comprehensive and quite conservative in the approach that we've taken as well.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you. No, that's really interesting. I liked your point about long term and
Yeah.
also ability that clients could just decide to go off balance sheet, right? So it's their choice and you have less control. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Great. Thank you. Mr. Cho, moving on to you then. As mentioned earlier at the beginning, Shinhan's highest emitting sector is the power generation. And you've set ambitious intensity reduction targets based on the SBTi 1.5 degree pathway. Can you tell us about the strategies that you are thinking of in Shinhan to meet the power generation emission reduction targets?
Thank you, Kate. I'm very impressed to hear that Toby mentioned the incentivizing customers and also the CO1's customer-oriented approach. Probably customer is the most important base to start to kick off the ESG management and implementation moving forward. And going back to your question, when it comes to emissions in countrywide, the power generation or utilities sectors are higher one, and more specifically in Korea, KEPCO's subsidiary account for a large portion of financed emission. And also considering the fact that the Korea's energy balance situation, we can say that the reduction of carbon emission is closely related to the country's power strategy and energy mix policy. As for NDC, nationally determined contribution target, South Korea has set the rate of emission reductions in the transition part to 44.4% by 2030. And maintains the policy of reducing coal power generation and expanding renewable energy policy. As a way of implementation to meet the goal, Shinhan also set an ambitious target aligned with this 1.5 degrees pathway and requested reduction plans on our side to our subsidiaries related to business operation. As a result, each subsidiary has been establishing a phase-out plan for the power generation sector and declaring to plan to phase out coal power generation as well, or engaging with clients and customers related to power generations. And other somewhat indirect methods, but essential strategies that Shinhan has been focusing on making many tangible achievements. I can say first is going to be creating business partnership to help power generation customers, clients produce more renewable energy. And second is going to be making effort continuously to promote cooperation on REC purchase and renewable energy power generation investment. And expanding eco-friendly financing and power generation related finances systematically through our Green Investment Banking Division and also the Global ESG desk based in London. So we are facing challenges in the implementation phase to balance the elements of risk side and opportunity side as well. But we'll make our best effort to find out the better solution continuously moving forward.
Yeah, thank you very much for touching a wide range of issues there. So I guess you are saying that you need the phase out of the coal assets that will then free up more space for you to grow your green assets as well, and that you can't really just look at green, and that you have to also take care of the current brown and to move that along as well, so that your whole portfolio changes over time. I think that is really the key that you are looking. That you need to push and pull in all directions to get this going. Thank you for that. So now turning on to DBS then, Kobe. DBS has set its reference scenario based on the global science-based scenarios. And for example, for your steel sector, you have used the Mission Possible Partnerships global scenarios without making any regional adjustments. So when I read that, I thought this was quite ambitious, since many of your steel clients are in China and in India, where their current emissions are much higher than the global average. So what are the reasons that to go with a global scenario, and can you tell us about your plans on implementation? Thank you.
Thank you. Actually, this is one of the sectors that we had a lot of discussions internally. You're correct. The target for steel is ambitious. And you're correct that DBS clients, many of them are based out in China and India. And we all know that, transition, national transition strategy is not uniform. And we fully recognize that and respect that. To give the context is that we do recognize that steel is a hard to abate sector. It is also one of the largest greenhouse gas emitter. So in that sense, we debated long and hard, and often we pointed out the fact that, hey, many of our clients are not in net zero 2050 geographies. But we also recognize many of our clients, although they may not be in a country that have net zero 2050 commitment, they themselves have made net zero 2050 commitments. And many of our clients actually serve globally. Maybe they're based out in one geography, but their business actually spans across globally as supplier and as a buyer. So in that sense, we felt that to meaningfully contribute and actually lead our clients, or not lead, it would not be the right word, encourage our clients towards a net zero by 2050, we need to be more proactive. And this is also the target here reflects our commitment to want to be at the forefront of the transition and be encouraging of our clients to make changes. And we do believe that the steel as a sector has many levers. Some of the levers may not be commercially ready in the near term, but we believe as such an important sector, it cannot be decarbonized behind the curve in a sense. So from there, we looked at MPP, the global scenario, and look at our own portfolio, and actually did see many of our own clients have already made net zero commitment. And in fact, working with our industry team, they obviously have very good, specialist knowledge in the sector, and reflect that, clients are actually keen, and there are, future investments that could drastically change the dynamics of the sectors. At the moment, maybe the equation have not really balanced yet. I understand there some of the costs and demand issues may not be at its optimal to facilitate transition, but we believe in the long run, this will come with some of the newer energy solutions available, as well as maybe a change in investment considerations. We do see that carbon tax being an important parameter as well, depending on the geographies. Many countries, although may have just started their carbon tax or consideration in that area, we're starting to see them springing up here and there, maybe gradually, given the current economic and geopolitical context, right? So we do have a view that direction of travel it's there. The pace may vary, may change and fluctuate from time to time, but we want to make sure that we head to the right direction. Also, by being ambitious now, it would allow us to make the net zero 2050 more achievable. If we leave it too late. By the time we get to 2030, we realize, oh my God, the gap is actually quite big. It's a little bit harder to catch up then. So that's one key reasons why we went on to adopt that. That's not the decision was not made lightly. The decision was made with many rounds of discussions.
Thank you, Kobe. Yeah, I guess what you're saying is that, you know, they are part of the bigger value chain across the green, the whole, you know, move towards transition towards the net zero economy. And I guess them being very active and forward leaning will help them to open new opportunities themselves, and also new technological innovations as well. So I guess
Yeah.
having that ambition will bring the reality to come together and to run with you. Yeah, thank you very much for that. Just checking with the organizers, is there like a Q&A session right now, or is there like a Q&A box that participants can give? No questions so far. Okay, so maybe then we can just talk amongst ourselves for the next, I think we've got about 9 minutes left. We've got about 10 minutes left, yeah. So is there any questions that you would like to ask each other? I was really impressed by all your reports. I thought, you know, I got so much out of each one. And, you know, everyone has slightly different things that are very strong, and I really liked, you know, Shinhan's. I thought the measurement and the disclosure was really detailed in Shinhan's case about how much emissions you have in different industries, and that was really good. And you know, Westpac's, I really liked the how you were trying to draw in all your sustainable development, you know, expertise into the net zero, so not separating the issue, and that the net zero was part of the bigger picture, which is sustainable development. And for DBS, you know, it was a really comprehensive set of targets, and I that was like really cutting edge in terms of target setting. Yeah. Any comments from any of the panels about your targets or about other people's targets? And
I want to say, by setting the target, it's just the very first step. The real work now begins. The real work now begins is how to support our clients to consider decarbonizing and how to integrate it and what makes sense to them in their geography and industry and market segment. The real work begins now, from my perspective.
Oh, look, I agree. It's such a great point. I agree that the hard work begins now when it comes to the implementation. How do you monitor? How do you track your performance? How do you ensure that your bankers are having great conversations with their clients? It's the training that you need to roll out through your organization, so you're uplifting the capability of your frontline. And then how do you also assess what does a credible transition plan look like that a client might have in an emissions intensive sector? There's just so much more work that needs to be done, but we're all working to achieve those same goals, which I think is really powerful. Yuki, great point around the fact that, you know, Westpac has sought to take a that kind of broader kind of integrated sustainable development approach as well. And look, you heard me do a shout out before for the Principles for Responsible Banking, but I think that's been really powerful because the PRBs, which was set up by UNEP and announced back in 2019, calls out you committing to both the Paris Agreement and the Sustainable Development Goals. And it's a really great kind of foundational, comprehensive way to think about sustainability. And then really the Net Zero Banking Alliance is a way for you to kind of, I guess, lift your ambition up from the PRBs, but it also, in a way, you've got that context and that holistic thinking that connects you back into your other ESG fundamentals with the PRBs. And I think it's really important. And I think what's going to be particularly interesting next year is we see the Task Force on Nature-related Financial Disclosures release its framework, really calling for how we think about climate in relation to natural capital. And as I mentioned previously, social impact and human rights from a just transition perspective. We can't think about these topics in isolation. And I think we're going to be increasingly expected to be able to join the dots for our clients, for our customers, and for our communities. It's complex. We will be learning from each other. But I think if you try and ground it into that broader context, I think you've got greater capacity to drive the change.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks very much. Mr. Cho, do you have any comments to make?
I just like to comment, implementing the strategy based on our target is going to be the first priority, but I'd like to say another area we have to be focusing on is going to be about communication and disclosure areas. Those are going to be some another challenges. It will be very important simultaneously to consider communication and disclosure with our stakeholders, including regulatory body and the internal steps to embed our strategy and the target. And we're going to be more actively communicate with our stakeholders moving forward. And based on our setting up ESG data inventory, we are kicking off those tasks at this moment. And based on that, the disclosure side, we will be more focusing on going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I think this session really covered a wide area that is really pertinent to the implementation of your targets. And what I hear is, first of all, the relationship, with your customers and your community and with your stakeholders like your governments and society, but all that, and also the institutional, big transformation that is happening in each of your banks, getting your top management to be able to talk about net zero is something that I don't think many people expected a few years ago, but I think your CEOs are now fluent in the language and they understand the business imperative, and your employees as well. You've got so many different trainings going on, both at your individual institutional level, but at the industry level as well, and with the PRB, the Principles for Responsible Banking, and the Net Zero Banking Alliance as well. These industry bodies are providing a lot of capacity building opportunities, and you've got, the data is now very closely connected to your disclosure that Mr. Cho was talking about. And and going back to what Siobhan was saying, I think next year and for this year's COP as well, the COP27 is going to be in Africa, where emission reduction is not the key issue here for climate change. It is really about adaptation, resilience, and so we expect that the coming together of nature issues, biodiversity issues with climate change is going to be happening at COP and beyond, and that more discussions will be happening around how do you bring together all the other sustainable development issues like circular economy, human rights, gender and social issues with emission reduction, which is just one part of our existential survival, because that is a key part, but that's not the only part. Yeah. So
I should just do a shout out there to Yuki, is that the team at UNEP 5, Principles for Responsible Banking, will also be sharing a paper on Finance Day as part of that around transition. So I think yeah, keep an eye out for that as well. A lot of thinking and work going into that. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you. Yeah, and for those who are at COP, I look forward to meeting you. I think DBS is going to be at the Singapore Pavilion, and GFANS will be at Four Seasons, and also the Singapore Pavilion for Apec. We'll be doing a session there, and also the Finance Day. Yeah, that would be really exciting, the 9th of November. So hope to see everyone there or virtually. And at another opportunity. So thank you very much for this really lively session. Really enjoyed moderating. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
There is a question on the side. Someone asked whether these reports that we've talked about are available to be downloaded. I think the answer is yes. They should all be on our website. I think usually for us, we are expected to make public disclosure.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So the question is, sorry, I can't see the question.
Yeah.
Question from the audience: Are the bank's reports available? Of course. Yeah. Yeah. I've taken them from the websites, your websites as well. Yeah, it's really an interesting read, all of them. Wonderful. Thank you so much. And we will be closing the session. Hope to meet you again soon. And
thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.